What's going on, guys? You're listening to Luke Squared Starting Lineup.
So today we'll kick things off with a brand new lightning round.
NHL playoffs, preview, and potential matchups.
Wrapping up the NBA regular season.
Guys, welcome back to Luke Squared Starting Lineup. I'm Lucas Slosser-mclean.
I'm Luke Zettel.
We appreciate you guys tuning in again. This is episode 4, and today we're actually going to try something different.
Yeah, first, before we get started, we just want to say thanks to everyone who's been listening. We've had over 100 listens on each of our first 3 episodes, so thank you. Keep listening to it. Keep telling your friends, your family, anyone who'd be interesting.
Share these videos.
A little reminder that all of you are welcome to send your feedback, your comments, and questions to our email. It'll be in the description down below. And we're really excited to keep this thing going, and we have a bit of a different format today.
Yeah, we're going to kick things off with a lightning round today, so we're going to talk briefly on about 10 or 11 subjects here, just a minute or two, quickly, and we're going to run through those with different inputs and analysis on those. Then we're going to obviously go into a more in-depth analysis on the NBA and NHL wrapping up the season, I guess, and potential playoff matchups, predictions, previews. And so, yeah, it's just we're going to try something different with that.
Before we get into that, we just wanted to let you guys know that next week our episode will look a little bit differently. We're going to try out a new initiative. We're going to get some cameras in here, and we're actually going to show you what it looks like, where we're working at, and we're going to have some video attached to our podcast.
So first video podcast will be next week. Make sure you tell everybody and make sure to tune back in for episode 6. But for tonight, let's get right into this lightning round. Hey, Luke, start the timer now, buddy.
All right, here we go.
All right, so we're going to kick things off, obviously, with the Kevin Pillar trade. Luke, what do you think?
This is sad. As a Jays fan, I love Kevin Pillar. He wears my favorite number, number 11. And he's someone that the city adores, the team adores, and he's all about Toronto.
Yeah, no, obviously it's pretty tough. Watching his post-trade interview today and his final goodbyes was pretty sad. He was crying, and you know what? He came when he was 24, and he's leaving when he's 30, and he quoted saying that, you know what, he came as a kid, and now he's leaving as a full-grown man with, you know, a lifetime of memories, and it's sad, but you know what, what do you think the organization is thinking at this point? Because Kevin Pillar was obviously batting .063 this season. It's early, that doesn't mean much, but .260 in his career. Not crazy numbers, but you know what? Obviously, there was the whole, you know, his defensive ability, the Superman. He was a fan favorite. So, what do you think? Yeah,
this is sad. As I said before, defensively, very, very sound. He was a very streaky batter at the plate, and it's no surprise to see that that was always a questionable part of his game. It was early in the season, but even last night, he went in for a pinch hit, and he ended up scoring a sacrifice fly and brought a run home, and there was potential for them to come back and beat Baltimore. But again, it's sad, but there's a lot of respect from the fans towards him, and he has a lot of respect towards the fans. He said,
"Baseball's a business, though, right?"
Honestly,
when it comes down to it, you know what? We traded Tulowitzki, Donaldson last year, and just unloaded Kendrys Morales. So when it comes down to it, you know, obviously the head office is starting to think that, you know what, it's time for kind of a reload. You know, mix it up a little bit, get some new players, get some young guys in, start trying to grow them and rebuild the franchise. So in that sense, it kind of makes sense. But you know what? It's always sad to see, you know what, a 6-year player, somebody who everybody loves, you know what, get traded. So
yeah, and in the with the last 2 seasons being a little bit disappointing, you need to shake things up a little bit, right?
Absolutely. We're going to move on. We're going to go to how the Rogers Center is bringing back ballpark favorites for $5 or less. I'm not sure. Like, I get it. Apparently, they're only going to be on one concession per level. I can imagine some big lines.
Yeah. So this is definitely an attempt to get fans back into the seats and back into the stadium. Because the fan turnout hasn't been great the past few seasons. The Jays haven't been great, so
especially this season.
They want to fill seats. So one of the concession stands on each of the concourses on each level will have these very cheap relatively speaking, ballpark favorite. So you can get beer, hot dogs, burger, fries, peanuts, popcorn. All of it will be $5 or less in an attempt to bring fans. But this is an interesting tactic because, yes, it'll be a big concession stand, but there'll be massive lines for it.
Yeah. And you know what? It makes sense what they're trying to do here. Whether or not that's actually going to bring people to, watch a team that was projected to go in the bottom 5 this year. That's another story. But you know what? Pretty good start for the pitching staff. Not a lot of hits as everybody projected, but it'll be interesting to see, whether that gets fans back in the seats and how the Blue Jays go throughout this 2019 season.
Yeah, I think anything that they do well will be bonus for Jays fans this year.
Absolutely. Moving on, obviously, Bryce Harper now in a Philadelphia Phillies uniform. And you know what? There's a little bit of debate and kind of how a couple analysts and myself were thinking, you know what? Philadelphia is a big market. It's a big sports market. And obviously, Bryce Harper being one of the youngest MVPs of all time, very talented kid, but his numbers are not going up, especially in the last couple of years. So how do you see him fitting into the Philadelphia market?
Well, I think it'll be really tough for his numbers to go up based on at what high of a level that he plays at. And so I think the biggest thing for him will be to stay consistent and for his play to not noticeably decrease because he has such a big following, such a big fan base, and such a big salary attached to his name. There's this expectation that he keeps playing at such a high level.
Absolutely, especially because he just moved a couple hours down the road to Philadelphia from, DC, and they're in this exact same division. So, Philly's a gritty market. They're 3-0. They're projected to go, top 10, top 5 in some rankings, some preseason rankings. So, he could but definitely be villainized in the eyes of a lot of these Philly fans if he doesn't play. But good start, a couple home runs last weekend. So we'll have to see how Bryce Harper plays out in Philadelphia.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the biggest thing for him is it's tough to build your team around a position player. Normally you see it built around one pitcher or a couple starting pitchers or a closer, or you see it built around a core of players. And it seems like most of the work and the efforts are put on Bryce Harper's back. So it'll be interesting to see how this still relatively young player deals with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Phillies are 3-0 off to a great start. We're going to have to see how that all turns out by the end of the season. Obviously, NCAA Final Four, disappointing for Luke's Duke team just a couple days ago and my UNC last weekend. But we've got Texas Tech and Michigan State after Texas Tech knocked off a very good Gonzaga and Michigan team, and MSU after knocking off Duke.
Yeah, it was definitely a very close game. The last 3 games for Duke decided by 2 points or less, and they came out on the wrong end of it. R.J. Barrett missing a big free throw, chance to tie it up at the line, and he missed it. And then he attempted to miss his next one and scored it. Yeah. So that's been just kind of how the free throws have been going for this Duke squad.
Yeah, that's tough.
But all hats off to Michigan State. They're a great program.
Cassius Winston
is the best point guard in the country, in my opinion.
Without a doubt. All-American, for sure.
And I really like the drive that Tom Izzo instilled in his players. He doesn't have a good record whatsoever against Coach K and Duke, and coming into one of the biggest stages and the biggest game of the year so far and taking care of business and escaping, hey, a win's a win.
Absolutely. And then on the other side, obviously, we have the University of Virginia Cavaliers against the Auburn Tigers. Auburn had just knocked off my UNC Heels, but unfortunately in the process, one of their star players, Okeke, actually ended up tearing his ACL. That's a big blow, but they had another convincing win right after that over Kentucky. Brown and Harper have both stepped up for this Auburn squad. You know what? It would be great to see a 5 seed get to the finals, and you know what? Maybe even take the national championship home. I'm not sure, Luke. Who do you have for Virginia and Auburn?
Well, before we get into that, I just want to say a little something about UNC. I watched the post-game press conference when Auburn dismantled UNC, for lack of a better word. They did take care of business.
Shut up.
Just wait for what I'm about to say. I watched the post-game press conference. But what really struck me and what really won me over was the class of Coach Roy Williams. He took a lot of the blame on himself, whether that's right or not. It was definitely a way to make the loss easier on his team. And he said over and over again, any other coach loves their players, but nobody loves their players more than Roy Williams loves his players. And as much as that's my favorite team's biggest rival, that kind of hit home with me. It was something nice to see. And you saw obviously disappointed seniors being Kenny Williams and Luke May were in the press conference,
Yeah.
and they're such class acts. And that entire team, hats off to UNC for making it as far as they did. Especially at the start of the season, they weren't projected to do nearly as well or even come close to being a 1 seed. So Roy Williams, in my opinion, he really won me over this season. He did a very good job coaching a team that was a little bit weaker on paper.
Well said, Luke. And so UVA or Auburn, who do you have going to the finals?
This is a good question. UVA, traditionally not a tournament team. This is the first time in the Final Four for Tony Bennett and for a while for the entire program.
Yep.
Auburn, though, is playing very, very well, and their perimeter shooting has been exceptional.
Oh, my goodness.
So I think I like the way Auburn's been playing, coming off a good streak in the SEC tournament, winning the SEC. I like them moving on because they defend pretty well, but their offense gets rolling, and against a team being UVA that doesn't score that many points, they won't be able to keep up with the offense.
I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. I love Auburn. I want to see them get to the finals, but I think, especially after losing Okeke, you know what? Brown and Harper stepped up incredibly against Kentucky, but I think I've got to take UVA. I think they had a big character win against Purdue. And then in the other matchup there, I'm gonna actually take Texas Tech just because of the way they knocked off Gonzaga and Michigan. They have not had an easy route to the Final Four at all, and they're here. I think they definitely are going to want to get to the finals. And you know what? MSU, big win over Duke, but that was their first real win in this tournament. So, you know what? I'm going to have to take Texas Tech, and I'm going to have to take UVA in the finals.
So I'm taking Auburn, and I'm also going to take MSU, Michigan State University, just because they have come up clutch in big games. They lose early in the year to Kansas in the Champions Classic, but they had a pretty consistent season since then, obviously a few losses here and there. They took care of business against Michigan, beating them 3 times this year. They overcome rivals Duke in the Elite Eight, and they have such a solid team and a sound team. I like the basketball that they've been playing.
Fair enough. And then now some sad news. Obviously, the Canadian Women's Hockey League, CWHL, has announced that it is folding. Obviously, you know what, that's tough. Women's hockey, you know what, viewership has gone up in the last couple of years, but it's tough because, you know what, they have the NWHL, which is the U.S.-based National Women's Hockey League. It's tough to, you know what, have 2 separate fan bases. And, you know what, the business model obviously was just not sound enough for that to continue on. But the good news is the NWHL has announced that it will be expanded to Montreal and Toronto. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, for sure. This is tough. From a Canadian spectator standpoint, because hockey, when women's hockey in particular in Canada, is so prominent, and the Canadian national team is always a favorite to get gold in various international competition. Having said that, this is a move towards making the game comparable to the men's game, in my opinion.
Yep.
Just like the men's game has the National Hockey League with both Canadian and American teams, this is slowly merging towards that. And since hockey in Canada is already established on the women's stage and women's hockey in Canada is already prominent, I like the direction that this can eventually end up. Whether it gets there or not, that's a different question. But I like this because immediately the NWHL is expanding to include Montreal and Toronto as teams, and I think that expansion won't stop.
Yeah, obviously some questions about whether this will be kind of a demise to women's hockey in North America. I think absolutely not. If you look at the viewership ratings, it's continuously going up. And you know what? There's lots of the world's best players that were playing in the CWHL. They're going to have to find a new club, which is tough. But you know what? The NWHL expanding to Montreal and Toronto, I think, on a business standpoint, it's a great move. But you know what? It's tough because, you know what? We love our hockey here, men's and women's. So we're going to have to see how that plays out. But I think it's a good move by the NWHL to expand almost immediately after they announce they're going to fold.
Exactly. Moving on, we want to talk a little bit about John Tavares and the backlash of being a Toronto player back at Long Island, New York. Let's talk about that a little bit. He was in the penalty box against New York, and there was a fan. There's a viral video going around social media right now, and a fan was really giving him the gears, saying that he quit on the team, that he's a scumbag. A lot of more vulgar terms directed towards him. Let's talk a little bit about that.
No, I think you need to grow up if you're an Islanders fan at this point. You know what? A lot of them are saying, you should have told us this and that. Can we all grow up for a second here? Obviously, that's tough, but you know what? Especially when it comes down to, you know what? Tavares has been there for such a long stint, played so many games for them, and has had such a successful career. and he's got a chance to, challenge for a cup in his hometown, his home city. I think it's brutal for the Islanders fans to have expected. Do you think they actually would have reacted differently if he had announced that he was leaving halfway through the season? No. I think that's absolutely absurd. I think that they're just, playing this off as, you should have told us, we should have had a heads up. A lot of players don't necessarily want to leave, but it's in their best interest to do so, or they do want to leave, and it's still a sad goodbye. I think he handled it properly, and this is his second time being back in Long Island this year, and he was able to get his revenge after the Leafs were absolutely torn apart the last time. They won 2-1, and Tavares scored a goal, so...
Yeah, and this was big for him especially. A little fun fact for you all out there is John Tavares, after scoring against the Islanders, became one of the few players, I think maybe even the only player, to score against each of the 31 franchises currently in the NHL.
Quite the feat.
So obviously he's a very good player, and this
broke
is just
his goal scoring record and is in the contest for goals leader and points leader as well. So
yeah, and I think that this is just a part of hockey, and this is the nature of the beast. And obviously you're going to get these trades that fans don't like, but I think it's ego kicking in for these fans.
Absolutely. We're going to move on to the NBA Rookie of the Year competition. You know what? It's all down to Trae Young and Luka Doncic. Not super close at the beginning of the season. Luka Doncic went crazy at the first half of the season, first 20 games. He went 18.5 points per game, 6.5 and 4.3 rebounds and assists per game, respectively. But you know what? Since the All-Star break, Trae is 25.8, 9, and 4.4 in points, assists, and rebounds, respectively. So he's had an absolute eruption. On the offensive board, he had a buzzer beater just last week against the Bucks. This is a player who is an absolutely incredible point scorer, three-point shooter, and it can facilitate the ball very well on offense. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, this is interesting because their play styles are a little bit different. You look at Trae Young; he's a very crafty, very quick and energetic point guard, and Luka, nothing against his skill. But they just don't look the same out there. So it's not like you're kind of comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah, exactly. Apples to oranges. No, 100%.
And over the course of the season, Luka has higher points and rebounds. But the way that Trae Young's been playing lately is phenomenal. Yeah. So this will be definitely a close race right to the finish. Ben Simmons commented that Luka deserves it. Could be right for sure. But I don't think Ben should have won it last year.
No, you know what? Ben said that, Luka deserves it because he's playing exactly like he did last year. Obviously, both of them had a lot of triple-doubles in the rookie season. But last year, I obviously thought Donovan Mitchell deserved it more. He was more influential for his team. He was kind of the only player, that was kind of making things happen for Utah. And you know what? The same could be said for both players this year. Neither of them are on very good teams, whereas Philly was a pretty solid team last year with the likes of Joel Embiid. But, I still have to give it to Luka just because of the consistency over the entire season, the triple-doubles. But you know what? Trae Young is an incredible player, and he's very exciting to watch. I'm really excited to see, if he kind of overtakes Luka next year. I'm not sure if that'll happen. Luka's out of this world, but...
Yes or no question, very quick. Do you think that Trae Young becomes better than Steph Curry?
Wow. Yes or no, very quick. Yes.
Yes, very good, very
I'm
good.
going to say yes. I know you're all going to hate me. Steph Curry, obviously one of the best three-point shooters of all. No, I'm going to say no. I think Steph is going to be one of the best three-point shooters for decades to come. I don't think, Trae Young is an animal. But you know what? Even though he's had an incredible first season, road bumps come. Things are going to happen where it's just too predictable to start off this good and keep going.
I think it depends on whether or not Trae Young gets himself surrounded by other great players that is able to open up himself to shine, because obviously being on a team with not very many other good players, he's the focus of the other team's defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And then we're going to actually move on to the MLS here. Toronto FC with a very hot start. The team is 3-0, despite losing big parts of their team such as Giovinco, Vanderbilt, and Vasquez. A lot of predictions, preseason rankings, including my own, had them not doing very well. Unfortunately, don't call me a fake fan. It's just what the facts are going to say. But you know what? They're 3-0. They've got one of the best goal differentials. The back line looks as strong as ever. Luke, what do you think?
I think the key for them is to be winning close games and not conceding points. So, if they're up by one goal, not conceding late in the game, because that could be the difference of them earning themselves a spot in the postseason. Yes, they have a very good start, but it was disappointing last year for them to
Yep.
not even make the postseason after coming in off an MLS Cup victory.
Yep, and you know what? Greg Vanney's kind of in the hot seat at this point. Lots of fans are considering whether he should still be a part of it, the future or not. So lots of pressure on him, and then they just landed their newest designated player, Alejandro Pozuelo, and in his very first game against New York City FC, 2 goals, 2 absolutely filthy goals, a Panenka, a penalty chip, and then a chip from nearly the top of the box, and then an assist. They look just as dangerous as ever on the front foot. We're going to hope that they can keep that consistency up. But you know what? You love to see Toronto FC have a hot start after, a shaky offseason.
And it's good to see the MLS gaining reputation
For
internationally.
Sure. Absolutely. Luke, push forward.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about about Curry, Green, and Durant. There was a little bit of controversy in their game against the Timberwolves. The game came down to 1 point. And there's a lot of criticism towards the refs coming from those 3 players. They were all fined for their actions. Long story short, they weren't happy with some of the refs' calls. Curry hits a go-ahead 3-pointer.
Tying, sir.
Oh, tying 3-pointer.
Yeah, at 1:30, yep.
Yeah. But then afterwards, and they kind of rub it in the ref's face. There's nothing the refs can do to stop that ball from going in. And then the game is decided on a loose ball foul that ends up being free throws.
Yeah, that's tough. But you know what? It's kind of karma as well. You know what? As bad as the refs are being, and you know what? You can say as much as you want. Draymond Green can go on social media as much as he wants. And you know what? Say the refs are not very good and sarcastically make remarks about them being the best of all time, the refs. But when it comes down to it, there's a certain level of professionalism you need, especially a team that a lot of people don't like because they've had such a dynasty-like last couple of years. You know what? They're obviously always going to be under the magnifying glass. I think they just need to focus on basketball. And yeah, it was a tough loss to a team that probably on a good day should not beat them, but you have to move forward and, you know what, just forget about it.
And again, you're a professional athlete. Everybody knows your name. Nobody knows the names of the refs.
Nope.
And you need to be held accountable for your actions. So I'm not a huge fan of the way that they went about that. You could be much classier. The refs are much more human, so to speak, than these professional basketball players. And I don't think this is the best way to go about it.
No, not at all. Moving forward, obviously the Cleveland Browns are in the top 10 preseason rankings after acquiring Odell Beckham Jr. You know what? They haven't had a winning season since 2007. Last year was their closest, going 7-8-1. So, you know what? It's good to see them, back and competing. The team's obviously made up of some key parts such as Nick Chubb, Odell Beckham Jr. himself, Jarvis Landry, and you know what? The second-year player this year, Baker Mayfield. They're the talk of the talk in the NFL, aren't they?
And it's good to see for the city of Cleveland because you look at the other professional sports teams, being the Cavaliers when LeBron James was in Cleveland. They were such a good team, winning championship and always being in contention. And then you look at the Cleveland Indians, and they also have a very, very good team, and they're always the talk of the town, earning themselves Josh Donaldson and
Cleveland's
Edwin
hungry.
Encarnacion.
They're hungry. They always want a championship, and it's not very often, that you see a long stint of poor seasons go on. Obviously, the Cavaliers are in shambles right now, but it's good to see that the Browns are back up and the Indians are just as strong as
the fact that it's been 12 years since their last winning season, this is potential and this is excitement for the city of Cleveland. So I think they have a lot of potential to do something special. Obviously, that the regular teams are still at the top of the power rankings heading into the season. But I like what Cleveland's doing here, and the Browns have some good talent.
We'll see how they can gel. We'll see if Baker Mayfield can, continue his answer up after his first opening rookie season. Very good rookie season. We'll see if he can, gel with, a lot of good players and see if they can be a star-studded attack, or if they're one of those teams that just don't have the right chemistry and the right DNA to, get to the next level. So.
And our last topic of the lightning round, we have the Bruins and Leafs in the first round. Obviously, these teams hate each other. Leafs fans hate the Bruins, and vice versa. Lots of history between the two teams. Let's talk about this a little bit more.
Absolutely. Obviously, Leafs fans don't like this matchup. We lost in 7 to them last year, and we don't match up super well. We lost them 3 times this year, going 1 win and 3 losses against them. They're a very good team, and they're very gritty, and that's the difference between the Leafs and the Bruins. The Bruins are able to be gritty and very star-studded and talented, whereas the Leafs are very young, quick, and talented, but they don't have a lot of fighters or enforcers at all. So you know what? This is going to have to be a matchup where the Leafs have to be able to keep a cool head under the likes of, guys like Brad Marchand, who just live to get under the skin of the opponent.
Exactly, and I don't know how this will play out because it's two very different play styles. If the Leafs were to have a player like Brad Marchand playing for them, it'd be interesting to see how the Bruins would be able to handle with someone constantly digging and prodding to get under their skin. But I think that the Leafs, the key will be outclassing the Bruins and letting their play style beat them and letting their play style speak.
Absolutely. And you know what? In the overall NHL rankings, this is a 3 versus 5 matchup. It kind of shines a light on how poor the playoff format is. You never want to see, you never see Canada and Russia go at it in the first round of the IIHF, right? World Hockey Championship. So you hate to see two heavyweights go at it right away because obviously you have to beat the best to be the best. But you know what? Early, it's tough for Leafs fans. It's tough for the Leafs. We're going to have to see how that ends up going on.
Well, and if the Leafs were to win this, they could potentially end up playing. They could potentially either play Tampa or Washington after this. So it's not like it gets any easier after winning a tough series. So this is something that frustrates me a lot because you want to see the best teams making it down the stretch, especially in a format that you play a best-of-7 series against each team.
Yeah.
So I would much prefer if the format was maybe a little bit different because these two teams could easily be in a conference final.
Absolutely. I think we should probably move on to the main body. That was our lightning round, though, and obviously a lot of subjects there. If you have any comments or suggestions, please give us a shout on our email.
Would love it. All right, so talking a little bit about the playoffs, we're going to touch on this a little bit longer and dive into a little bit more depth. Obviously, a disappointing season for my Vancouver Canucks. We're mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. Didn't expect much out of them. But let's talk about the current matchups and the teams who are still in the hunt for these playoff spots. So we talked about Boston-Toronto. That matchup is pretty much set. And currently we have Washington and Columbus. This one...
Well, you know what? Washington's north of 100 points, so they're obviously a very good team. And Columbus, a very good season as well, 94 points. And honestly, they've got... I think they're pretty much solidified with their spot at the top of the wild card. Carolina's right behind them, and you know what? Montreal right behind them as well. So it is still a 3-horse race for that final wild card spot. Anything can happen in the remaining 3 games of the season for those 3 teams respectively. But you know what? I do think that how Columbus has been down the stretch, they can, kind of finish this off. The Blue Jackets do lead this regular season series, though, 3-0 or 3-1-0. So that will be a good season. Obviously, it all comes down in playoffs to player matchups. And that's kind of why it's scary for the Leafs. But you know what? Coming down to player matchups, obviously the Blue Jackets match up really well against the Capitals. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. You know what? You look at the Capitals and you know what? They've got 276 goals and 245 against them. They've got a pretty solid differential. And in their last 10, you know what? They're 6-3-1, whereas, you know what? The Blue Jackets are 7-2-1. So it's 2 very good teams that are on hot streaks. I'm really looking forward to that series.
And if I'm Columbus, I'm pretty confident going into this matchup should it play out like this, just because of the familiarity with Washington, both teams being from the Metropolitan Division. So that'll be an interesting one to see if Columbus could dethrone the potential leaders of the Metropolitan Division.
What's going on in Long Island? That's the question. The New York Islanders, obviously after losing John Tavares, are sitting second in the Metropolitan, and they are set right now to face the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm sure that's how it's going to finish with a couple games left. That's probably how it's going to end, but obviously whoever gets home ice advantage is still up in the air, but the Islanders have still been able to generate a decent amount of offense, but it's their goaltending that has really been the show. Only 195 goals against, and so it's going to be tough, but you know what, when you look at a squad like Pittsburgh, they're kind of like the Golden State Warriors in a sense. It doesn't really matter how they do in the regular season because they have so many champions on that team, so many players that know how to win. I just don't see an outcome that's favorable for the Islanders. And in the regular season, obviously, it's tied 2-1-1. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. But you know what? In the last 10, the Islanders are about 5-5-0, and the Pittsburgh Penguins are 6-2-2. So you know what? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, I think this is a real testament to the characters that Pittsburgh has on their team. If we go back about a month and a half, 2 months, Pittsburgh was on the fringe and they were battling for a wild card position. But down the stretch, they find ways to win games, and they know how to win. They have those franchise names like Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. They've got a hotshot goalie in Murray right now, and I really like the way they're playing. And I don't think it really matters where Pittsburgh ends up in the standings. They can easily make a run to the cup year in and year out.
As long as they're able to get goals, I don't think the Islanders forwards are going to be able to compete with that. But moving on, obviously we're looking at a Tampa Bay Carolina Hurricanes matchup as well. Carolina, we love to see them in this. I think it's great that they're kind of had a season out of nowhere. And you know what, their antics after the game, I'm all for it. They're an exciting team to watch. They're excited to be there, but look at who they're playing right now.
They're playing a team that could potentially post 130 points, which is ridiculous and almost unheard of.
Yeah,
and
clinched the President's already.
Clinched the President's Trophy, without a doubt. And they're ridiculous. Still, they've only lost 3 times in regulation.
They have a plus 100 goal differential,
15 times,
which is you know what, around it's 40. It's around 40. 35 better than any other team, which is Calgary, obviously, with a plus 66, which is incredible as well. But this team scores a lot, and they do not concede a lot. It is a perfect storm. And this Carolina team, as exciting as they are to watch, I don't think they have much of a chance.
No, that's very
which is sad, but you love to see the Hurricanes in the postseason doing well.
It'll be fun to see their team dynamic going into those matchups and bringing in the best team in hockey.
I'll be shocked if
but I can't see
the Lightning don't even if they don't take it home. I know it's cliche to say, you know what, the 1 seed should take it all home, but they are just so incredibly dominant.
Yeah, they're playing so well.
They dismantle teams, even teams that are just a couple points below them.
I think the only team that I can see beating them in the Eastern Conference before they get to the Stanley Cup Finals would be Pittsburgh, just because of Pittsburgh's will to win. That would be my only bet.
Pittsburgh's always going to be scary. It doesn't matter where they finish. As long as they're in the playoffs, they are always going to be a title contender.
Always have an opportunity. Moving over to the Western Conference.
Absolutely.
Let's look at the top team in the West. Right now, we've got the Calgary Flames.
It's been a while since we've seen a Canadian team at the top of the Western Conference, so that's exciting. Obviously, 107 points. They don't have many good teams left that they're playing against. They're going to cruise into the postseason. Their current potential matchup would be with the Avalanche of Colorado. And you know what? The Flames have swept the season series. I'm not sure if Colorado can respond in this.
Well, firstly, Colorado needs to make the playoffs. Arizona has been knocking at the door, and Colorado only has a 2-point lead on them with 3 games left. So if Colorado can't close out down the stretch, we could very easily see Arizona slip into that final spot. However, regardless of who ends up in that final spot, Carolina's clinched the conference, Calgary has clinched the conference. There's lots of Cals going on, and I think Calgary is going to make it through the first round, no question.
No, without a doubt, you're right. And you know what? San Jose and Vegas in another matchup. This could be a very good series. San Jose with 97 points, Vegas with 93 points. Not the start Vegas wanted to the season, but they have really turned it all around. And you know what? In the season series, you know what? Vegas obviously taking San Jose 6-0. San Jose taking Vegas. Vegas taking San Jose. Vegas. You know what? San Jose taking Vegas. It's back and forth. The entire series is back and forth. They're only separated by 4 points. San Jose is a very scary team who's been playing good hockey as of late, obviously. But you know what? In the last 10, they're only 2-7-1. So, you know what? It could be a potential that Vegas, who's 5-3-2, not incredible either, could find an upset in that game just because of how they're walking into the playoffs. But at the same time, the playoffs are completely different than the regular season.
And this is a big toss-up because this matchup is very much set in stone. It'd be very unlikely to see a matchup different than this.
No.
Because these two teams are basically locked into their positions. So an All-Pacific division matchup, 2 teams that know each other. The regular season has split between the 2 teams. And this could go either way. You have a team coming off a loss in the Stanley Cup Finals in their inaugural season, and a team who hasn't made a deep playoff run in a while, who's hungry.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last matchup, we're going to finish up here with...
Second last.
Oh, sorry, second last matchup, actually. We've got the Winnipeg Jets, another Canadian team in the hunt for another cup, and obviously Dallas Stars. That's going to be a good game, but Winnipeg has looked fairly dominant there at the top of the Central. And you know what? Dallas, they're at the top of the wild card race, 3 points up on Colorado. I think they are in for sure in this matchup, at least. You know what? In their last 10, they're 5-3-2, but Winnipeg's 6-4-0. It all kind of comes into who's coming to play in that day. And this is another game where, you know what? Even though Winnipeg is having a much better season, 7 points over top of them. The Stars lead the season series 3-1-0. So you know what? It's one of those things where it's player matchups. Anything can happen in this.
Yeah, and these are two teams that neither of them have immense playoff experience. Teams that are usually kind of on the bubble in the playoff picture, and it'll be interesting to see which players rise to the occasion. So moving on to the last matchup, we have right now St. Louis and Nashville. It looks as though this will be a certain matchup, depending on if anybody
and
can...
a crazy matchup at that.
Yeah, depending on anybody who can catch Winnipeg, whether that'll happen or not. The other question that comes into play is which team out of St. Louis and Nashville would have home ice advantage.
Both tied at 94, obviously, but St. Louis looks better in their last 10. But you know what? This Nashville team, obviously an incredible season last year. You know what? Scoring a little bit less, but also conceding less. So this is going to be a very big matchup. But St. Louis has got their number this season, 4-1-0 in the season series. I'm not sure. What do you think?
This is going to be a real battle. Based on numbers, you tend to go with St. Louis in this situation because they've won the season series 4-1-0. However, it's the playoffs, it's the Stanley Cup playoffs, and anything can happen. And a team like Nashville, of years recently, they've been very good, and they've been hungry in the playoffs, and it hasn't really panned out for them. So they would love to bring home a Stanley Cup and make a run deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to finish off, obviously in the Eastern Conference, still in the hunt is Montreal. They're only trailing the Hurricanes by 1 point. There's 3 games left. We're going to see how that goes. I'm hoping to see, obviously, Carolina finish it off, even though Montreal's a Canadian team. Leafs fans hate Montreal, and that's just how it goes. And then in the hunt for the Western Conference, we still have Chicago, Minnesota, and Arizona. Arizona trailing Colorado by 2 points. Minnesota trailing Colorado by 5 points, and Chicago trailing Colorado by 6 points. Chicago and Minnesota, it doesn't look promising. You never know, but Arizona could still find themselves into the playoffs.
Yeah, I could see Arizona maybe catching Colorado if Colorado isn't able, like I said, to close out the season. But Minnesota and Chicago are basically out of the picture. They're eliminated, but not mathematically eliminated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's basically how we're looking right now. If we were to pick right now, what would you say the Stanley Cup Finals would be?
Stanley Cup Final, I've got Tampa Bay. I think they're too dominant in the Eastern Conference. And you know what? Despite San Jose being poor in their last couple games, or their last 10 games, 2-7-1, I do have the Sharks going in there. I think they're too good on paper, and they've got a lot of experience in that team, especially in the playoffs. They're hungry. They haven't been to the finals, or at least they were not in the last couple of years. So it is definitely something that the Sharks want to get to. I think that they are too experienced and too quality, you know what, to kind of walk into the playoffs and keep that form. I think they'll turn around. What about you?
I do like the way that Tampa Bay has been looking. I think it'll be either Tampa Bay or Pittsburgh when it comes down to it. I think Pittsburgh is the only team that can, in the East, that can give them a run for their money over a 7-game series. And then in the Western Conference, you look at teams like Winnipeg. They made a decent run last year to the conference finals. I could see Winnipeg, San Jose, or Calgary, any of those 3 teams coming out. But if I'm going to pick one team, I like Calgary. They're a young, vibrant team. They've put up an exceptional season, and this is fun for Calgary Flames fans as much as they're a rival to my Canucks. I like Calgary coming out of the West.
Fair enough. There we go. And we're briefly just going to go over the NBA, you know what, kind of wrapping up the season. Obviously in the West, we have all 8 teams have clinched, with the Thunder rounding out the 8th seed. But you know what? It's very much in the air with that 7-8 matchup. The Spurs and the Thunder are both 8.5 games back from the lead with both 44 and 33. So that could change over the next couple games. I think the Thunder are a very good team. I think that nobody's going to be able to take the Warriors in the first series, but if the Thunder were able to get into that 7th seed, they could definitely take the Nuggets. But even the Nuggets could, overthrow the Warriors. It's going to be tough, obviously, in the last half dozen games, but I think the Warriors are pretty much solidified at number 1. But I think that if the Thunder get into that 7th seed and play the Nuggets, they can make a run. Also, the 5-6 matchup is separated by 0.5 with the Jazz and the Clippers. The Clippers have been absolutely incredible, but as of the Jazz, 9-1 and 8-2 for the Jazz and the Clippers respectively, both on winning streaks. And even the 3-4 matchup, we've got Portland and the Rockets. And the Rockets have been good in their last 10, but the Blazers have been even better, 8-2 in their last 10. So anything could happen in that last half dozen games.
Yeah, I really like what's happening right now, particularly with the Jazz and the Clippers. They've been playing very good basketball, as have the Trailblazers. They're, those three teams winning much more than they're losing, and that's what you need to be one of the best teams in the league and to build a team ready to bring home the NBA title. So again, the Warriors, I think that they're basically untouchable in the first round. They should coast through that, but it'll be very interesting to see. Provided they win that first round, they could be playing any one of the teams, being the Rockets, Jazz, Clippers, Trailblazers. One of those teams in that mix.
We're all very, very close teams.
Yeah, and those teams are impeccable teams, and kudos to those programs. And all of these teams, I think, are very deserving of being in the playoffs for certain, because you already have a handful of games left. But
what's funny actually is that the Spurs are this is their 22nd straight postseason appearance. Greg Popovich, even though they're in the 7th seed and they've been fairly mediocre all season, you know what? You can never really count them out, especially against that Nuggets team who has a lot of players who have not seen the playoffs. So you never really know, especially with the Spurs, DeMar DeRozan having an incredible season after being traded. But it'll be tough to see how that's going to.
And on that note, I like DeRozan. He's hungry. Obviously, he hasn't been able to make it to an NBA final, and I think that with a team like the Spurs, who has a reputation for being very good and being in the playoffs, it'll be interesting to see how he responds to that in the postseason.
Absolutely. Then we're going to move over to the Eastern Conference to finish this all up. Obviously, the Bucks and the Raptors, top two, both clinched their division. But the talk is all about the final push for the playoffs, because you know what? The Hornets are still in it. It doesn't look like they're going to, push in. They do have half a dozen games left, but the Magic are a team that have beaten the Raptors several times this year and are a strong team. They're definitely giant killers. They're also on the outside looking in, but only by a half a game to the Miami Heat. Obviously, Dwayne Wade's last season, he's hoping to be able to push them in for one final go. And they're only a half a game back from the Nets, who are only a half a game back from the Pistons. So all those teams have not clinched yet, but it is incredible to see how close that final push is. So, you know what? The Detroit Pistons have had a pretty good season against, some top teams as well. But I really like this Brooklyn Nets team. I think especially if they end up getting into that 6th spot and go against the 76ers, you know what? They are looking very good. And I definitely think that them and the Pistons are pretty much solidified in that spot. I think it's all going to come down to whether the Magic can overtake the Heat. I'd love to see D Wade in for one more push in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Not that it would go more than one round because of how dominant the Bucks are, but you know what? With how good the Magic have been, and especially in their last 10, 7-3, that's a good quality team who is doing a lot of good things.
Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see a Toronto Raptors and Detroit Pistons matchup, having Dwayne Casey coaching Detroit and have him going up against the team that...
Especially how the Pistons have done against the Raptors this season, swept them, which is
pretty
tough to see.
And I think that's definitely a testament to how well Dwayne Casey deals with adversity and emotion. He's a very classy man, and a lot of Raptors fans understand that he built the Raptors from a pretty low point. Raptors weren't doing too great. He came in and brought them to a team that was
Coach of the Year last year, obviously. So.
And it was a shock, as everyone knows, for him to win Coach of the Year and then get let go by the front office. So that would be a very interesting matchup, and frankly, it's something I would love to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay tuned over the next half dozen games because anything could really happen, especially in the Eastern Conference and with the Western Conference. Just who could be potential matchups? It's too early to say, but who do you have in the finals?
I really like the Bucks. They're very good. The Greek Freak playing very, very well, being Giannis, of course. But I like the Raptors. They have a fresh look compared to last season. Kawhi Leonard has found himself a team that he's kind of bought into. Yeah. He barely played for the Spurs, right?
Yeah,
and he just
especially his last season.
And he didn't really enjoy his time there, as is speculation. So I think the Raptors will come out of the Eastern Conference. Love to see the only Canadian team make it to the finals. And just based on the dynasty, I'm going with the statistic, and I think that Golden State Warriors will come out of the West.
Fair enough. That's pretty good call. I'm going to also go with the Raptors. I think this is finally their year. Bucks came out of nowhere, but in the playoffs, I'm not sure how they're going to respond. It's a different atmosphere, but they're very deep, but as are the Raptors, and I think that they will find a way to push it by, all biases aside. And I think in the finals, you know what? Everybody would love to say the Warriors, but I actually have the Houston Rockets in the finals. This second half of the season, they've been absolutely incredible. I think that they're too star-studded, and I think, you know what, with James Harden's ability to score from just about anywhere on the court, they will meet the Raptors. And take a billion steps. Yeah, absolutely. So, no, that'll be interesting. But that pretty much wraps up our show.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us. This was fun.
It was definitely fun.
Doing the lightning
round, something different. So let us know, especially if you like the lightning round or if you have a different format you want to see, different subjects, feel free. We really definitely encourage you to reach out to us at our email, which will be in the comment section below.
And it's also really tough for us to come up with topics to talk about sometimes. So make our job a little bit easier. Get a shout out. Get your name out there.
Yeah.
And we'd love to have any feedback or any topics that we want to talk about.
It's been an absolute pleasure, guys. Thanks for listening.
And just get ready next week. There will be video of us. You'll get to see the setup that we have. Looking forward to it.
Exciting times.
So take care.